WVOX. Welcome to Slow Medicine Radio. Our host is integrative medicine Dr. Michael Finkelstein. Michael offers medical advice from a holistic paradigm, including both medical and metaphysical philosophies from the full spectrum of human experience. Slow Medicine Radio offers fresh ideas on how to attain a state of wellness that seems distant given the limitations of today's medical paradigm. It introduces you to thought leaders who connect the dots between theory and practice, examining health from a broad perspective with regards to medical diagnoses, conventional and alternative therapies, healthcare policy, and related topics that warrant further thought and discussion. Slow Medicine Radio does not prescribe to take this or do that. Instead, it offers an open-minded, intelligent, and practical approach to living, resulting in greater health individually and collectively. Here is Dr. Michael Finkelstein, the founder of Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York.
Well, welcome to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein, and we're here every Monday at 5 o'clock Eastern on 1460 AM and WVOX.com worldwide. And this show is really about your health. I can talk about a lot of things in respect to health subjects. What I really want to know is what makes you feel healthy and what makes you think that you are healthy. This comes to mind today because in the last week or so, both of the front-running presidential candidates have had questions about their health put forth in the media. Hillary Clinton a week ago, we spoke about pneumonia and respiratory conditions. And then a few days later, Donald Trump shows up on the Dr. Oz show to reveal his health records or parts of his health assessment. And this is what I want to talk about today. What makes a person healthy? So what kind of records, forgetting our presidential candidate, but what would you need to be done in evaluation to really ascertain whether or not you are as healthy as you could be? And of course, we could get into the subject of these candidates, but I think more important, more relevant to you really is the subject of you. So I'd like to hear from you. Call me at 914-636-0110 anytime during the show to ask a question about that subject. I think that it's something that I know everyone is interested in because ever since I announced that I was going to medical school back somewhere in the 1970s, that's all I get at dinner. People asking me questions about their health. So I imagine you've got a question and something that we can explore together and will likely be interesting to many other people. So let's get to the subject of Donald Trump for the moment. So he shows up to the Dr. Oz show and hands Dr. Oz two pieces of paper. And without commenting or questioning whether or not Dr. Oz's response was, ideal, I'm just wondering if any of you think two pieces of paper would be enough to reveal whether or not somebody is entirely healthy. And call me, 914-636-0110. My guess is that those paper contained a couple of sentences on the subject of blood work, like what his cholesterol might have been, his blood counts, electrolytes, might have been, as Dr. Oz reported, a brief paragraph on the interpretation of a CAT scan of his coronary arteries to determine if there was calcium there, which would be somewhat of a evidence of impending coronary artery disease, heart attacks, if you will, or heart disease. Maybe there was a gastroenterological report, like a colonoscopy, which is generally recommended for people over the age of 50. And conceivably, all of those might have been normal. Does that mean that Donald Trump is perfectly healthy? I'll give you a story. So when I was practicing internal medicine, one of the things that internists do is clear people for surgery. That means they examine them, they do blood work and an examination before surgery just to determine if somebody has a significant operative risk, which might change the anesthetic approach. It may even be a reason to cancel the surgery altogether. It's somewhat routine, and the tests that are done for that are blood pressure, heart, and lung exams, a general physical, if you will, maybe 15 or 20 minutes of examining parts of the person speaking to them, of course, about if they're symptomatic in any way. A cardiogram, electrocardiogram, which is the thing that you do when you lie on a table. People put 12 leads on your body, on your limbs, on your chest. And after a couple of seconds, a graph is produced that looks like lines on a paper that look to the electrical impulses coming from your moving heart. X-rays are done, often a chest X-ray, and blood tests, blood counts, and general chemistries. And so I did that routinely. Probably at least once a week, there was somebody who was seeing me specifically for that type of examination. And for the most part, I felt comfortable that my examination was going to identify problems, major problems. But the truth is, and the sad truth is, that once in a while somebody has normal test results on all those areas, even with a half an hour examination and a conversation and the blood work and the cardiogram and the chest X-ray, all normal, and things unexpectedly happen. So one day I saw this man. He was in his late 60s. He had prostate symptoms, meaning he was having difficulty urinating, and the common procedure done at that time was a transurethral resection of the prostate, which is a pretty straightforward procedure, only required spinal anesthesia. And I saw him, and basically there was nothing on his exam or the blood work that would indicate that there was a problem. But the following day or 2 days later, when he was on the way to the hospital, his wife reported that he was terribly anxious. And when he was anxious, he started to experience chest pain and clearly developed a coronary syndrome, meaning he had a heart attack, on the way to the hospital for his elective prostate surgery. I did the best that I could, and even with that lens and with the analysis that was available to me, the technology, could not see into the future that well. What does that mean about our health? What does it mean when things like that happen? We all have had that experience, not necessarily personally, but we probably know somebody, at least personally, who's been examined by a doctor and within weeks, months, sometimes days, come out with a pretty significant illness. We must be, as physicians in general, very modest about our power to really know that much. We can use our judgment and our experience to do well, and we can help people quite clearly, but there still are things that go beyond detection when the analysis is simple chemistries and x-rays, etc. That's life, and that's an unfortunate limitation of the Western medical model, because when I do that, and as a general rule, when I was doing that in my practice, and that's what I was doing, where I was examining people and then sending them off and saying, hey, you're pretty healthy, your blood tests are good, or maybe I was tweaking their cholesterol with medications or their blood pressure with medications. I was really focusing so entirely on the physical body that there were other things that I left untouched. And part of that is how we deal with stress. As an example, a case of point, my patient, who really needed some help in dealing with the stress and anxiety associated with that procedure that he was going to have. And I didn't explore that with him at the time. That's not something I learned in medical school. But trust me, after experience like that, I thought very carefully about what I was doing and realized that I needed to learn more to help more people. And that's what I want to talk to you about. What kind of help is that? What's that look like? Again, call me if you have a question or you want to participate in this as a conversation. The number is 914-636-0110. So what I'm going to offer now is this idea that I've learned about, which I think is worthy of sharing, and something that I wrote about in my books, Slow Medicine, Hope and Healing for Chronic Illness, that our health is much more than our physical body, of course. When we say somebody is healthy, it probably implies that their body is in reasonable shape. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's in reasonable shape. But the other parts of their life are like the moving pieces, things that they do with that body, such as they're in relationship to other people. Most of us maybe aspire to a partnership, a husband or wife, and that relationship might define. In fact, I think the quality of our relationships often are the best barometer of our health, because it requires everything coming together, not just our body, but our mind needs to be sort of connected in such a way that we could take advantage of that good body we may have by being able to share it with somebody else. Similarly, another piece of this puzzle is the work that we do in the world, whether that's physical work 9 to 5, a job that earns income, or we support and take care of other people, like raising children or teaching or being a member of a community. These are things that we do with that healthy body. Of course, we have relationships to other entities, the natural world, the rhythms and cycles of nature. We're coming up on autumn. Are we doing anything different as the fall approaches, or are we going to still run like we do in the summer? Our relationship to something beyond ourselves, I'll call it the divine. Our communities. These are the 7 spokes of the slow medicine wheel of health that I'd like to continue to create as an image for you to really get to that question of what does health look like? What are the variables? What are the details that one would want to manage like you would if you were tuning up a race car? You would take care of the tires, you would take care of the engine, you would take care of the spark plugs, you would take care of the fuel lines, you would take care of the visibility through the windshield and the oil and the lube of everything that moved. Not just the tires, it's not just the gas. And lastly, it's the driver. Where's that person going with that car? That's health to me. Let's talk about it. I think that there's somebody on the line. What's your question? Welcome to Slow Medicine Radio.
Hi, how are you? My name's Ken. I'm calling from New Rochelle.
Hi, Ken.
Hi, how are you today?
Great.
Okay. I feel that there is a lot of emphasis nowadays that's placed on the healthcare provider in order to maintain the human body, and whereas a lot of that responsibility should actually fall on the person themselves. A lot of times people don't take care of themselves, or they rely on the doctor to tell them what's wrong. A lot of times your body will actually give you signs that something isn't right. And people, for whatever reason, either they're too busy, they don't have the time, they just feel that they can't really, take the time out to see a physician, and or just to get a checkup and say what's going on.
Yeah, Ken, I think that's a great point. I think that in the end, while we want to have good consultants in our life, people that point us in the right direction, perhaps, and tune us up a little bit, we need to be in charge of where we're going. And we need to ultimately be in charge of what we put into our body, what we put and feed our mind, how we develop, encourage our relationships, and how we move in relationship to everything that's going on in the world. And so that a doctor is not going to do for us. A doctor might tell you, hey, maybe consider changing your diet or being more active, but it's you that have to go shopping and buying one type of food or another, or you have to get up a half an hour early to take that walk or to do something in response. So this is part, though, I think, when you commented about the healthcare providers, it is a role, though, I think, that healthcare providers don't take on with as much sincerity as they may do with other things that are simpler for them, like, responding to technology. In other words, they're not encouraging people, and they're not sharing with the thought that you just said, which is that not only do you need to take care of yourself, but I want to help you do that. I'm not just going to scare you. I'm not just going to give you answers to questions like what's my cholesterol and debate whether or not you take medications, but I'm going to talk to you about your life, your lifestyle. I'm going to care about your relationships. But you know what the problem with that is? You need to have a conversation with somebody, and that takes time. You also need to be prepared for what you're going to hear, which is, no, you know what? I'm struggling with my relationships. I really don't love my job. I wake up in the morning and I just don't have the energy. I'm a little down. That's not like a quick fix. And so the healthcare system as a whole is not set up to help you and help people who have that question. So that's why I stepped back myself from that practice. There are many fine physicians who can do the nuts and bolts, respond to blood tests, take them, do what Dr. Oz did on television. But I want to be able to have that conversation with people, which is why, by the way, I have this radio show. Because, it's not possible for me to see thousands and thousands of people, but I can speak to them and I can help them take ownership and to understand how important that is, and then to give them practical advice about how you actually do that and move them closer to that point, help people do that together with each other so it's a little bit more fun and becomes part of the culture. Those are the things that are important to me. Thanks for your question. Let's take a break, and we'll come back. And Ken, if you want to stay on the line, if you have a follow-up question, please do. But for now, let's just pause. For those of you who'd like to call, the number is 914-636-0110. We're talking about your health on Slow Medicine Radio. Stay with us.
You're listening to Slow Medicine Radio. You can find out more about the show and the work of Dr. Michael Finkelstein by visiting his website, slowmedicinedoctor.com. Slow Medicine Radio is sponsored by the Slow Medicine Foundation, dedicated to providing community-centered experiential and reflective learning for individuals, families, and groups, offering educational programs, events, and resources, as well as insightful health evaluations with customized medical guidance. Dr. Finkelstein works with his wife, Robin Queen Finkelstein, at their farm, Sunraven, in Bedford, New York. And they invite you to visit and take advantage of this unique resource, including men's and women's groups and couples programs. If you think about it, much of what we experience when we don't feel well is a result of the fast world and how it affects us. Therefore, if fast is the disease, then slow is the medicine. Visit Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York. Go to slowmedicinedoctor.com or call 914-218-3113. And thank you for tuning in Mondays at 5 p.m. right here on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome back to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein, and we're here every Monday at 5 o'clock on 1460 AM and worldwide at WVOX.com. And I was just sharing my thoughts about, and from Ken's call, which was a great subject, which is how do people and, what can people understand about the importance of taking ownership of their own health? And occasionally you need somebody to fix it. If you break a leg, you're going to go to a hospital and you're going to be put in a cast. That makes a lot of sense. But the truth is, your leg will heal in various rates and to varying degrees of wholeness. And afterwards, the stiffness and the experiences that you have and how well you recover fully beyond that has a lot to do with what you do. Meaning, are you eating an anti-inflammatory or an inflammatory diet? Are you still stressed out? Are you still relatively inactive? Are you in harmony in your relationships? Those actually have impact on wound healing. And that's the most basic wound you can have, just a broken bone. What if you have a disease, meaning something that's got a mind of its own operating in your body, a metabolic imbalance or a disease like cancer? How can you, in addition to whatever you get as far as treatments from doctors, support that process and do better than average? What are the things that are in your control? And I'm going to tell you that there are many things that are in your control, most of which you're not necessarily going to get from the conversations that are minutes long with your doctor. So you're going to have to figure out another way. And look, I wish the system was different. I wish doctors made house calls and you knew this person and then you spent an hour after dinner chatting and you just felt all of that love and companionship and support and not got a lot of the advice that way. But that's not the world. So we're going to be left to our own devices and ultimately left within our own communities, which is a big part of what helps us be whole. People who live in isolation feel worse, don't do as well in life often. And I don't want to completely generalize, but we know that support, friendships, loving families are very important to our well-being, our qualitative assessment of how well we're doing. Art, expression, hobbies are another things that people can do. How does what you think affect your body? What are your reactions to your thoughts? Do you get anxious a lot? Do you worry a lot? Do these, as you may recognize, have effects in your body? Indigestion, headaches, backaches. These are often a reflection of this chronic stress that has a lot to do with what we're thinking about, what's on our mind, what's in the world around us. Do we, in a sense, ignore nature's cues? For instance, the most obvious example is you don't put on a coat when it's, 40 degrees and raining, that cold, terrible rain in November, and you decide not to put on a coat. Well, how do you feel, drenched and wet coming back in? The achiness that you experience, the cold that you're susceptible to, these are all results of not paying attention to nature. And there's more subtle examples of that. But again, we're approaching a new season. Most people will not necessarily make the adjustment, will do the same physical activity they did, the same diet that they've done, the same number of, daily practices, ignoring the fact that it gets darker earlier so that maybe they should go to sleep earlier. No, people usually get into routines 365 days a year, regardless of the season, and I would suggest that that's not ideal. So these are the things that I talk about in my work. One place that you can look that I think is useful is I give people a questionnaire. I call it the Wellness Self-Test. It's 77 questions, and they're meant to be an inventory of sorts that you look at. You see these different questions, And they touch on these 7 areas, these 7 spokes of the medicine wheel, and they help a person see where they're strong and where they're relatively weak, and giving people ideas about where they may work a little bit or pay attention a little bit so that they can start improving the whole. And to me, the real answer to the question, how am I doing? Am I well? Am I healthy? Is answered by the individual. Do you feel fit? Are you fit in your body? Do you feel strong? Do you feel comfortable? Do you think clearly? Are your relationships good? Do you like what you do? These are the components of an answer that really are better to determine if somebody is healthy or not. And of course, you do get measured. Yes, it's good to have blood work and cardiograms and x-rays and exams. The medical establishment is very useful there, but it's one piece. It's one piece. I would love the candidates to go through the wellness self-test and share honest answers. Of course, that's a big question mark, but share answers to the questions about those different things so we can get a sense of how in balance are they. And a full, extensive report of their physical examinations and their histories, because a lot of them are not just what diseases they may have had or symptoms they have, but will give people a sense of how they do under stress. Do they think clearly? Do they take care of themselves? What I want to know in a leader of any sort is, do they take care of themselves? The question that we got was how important that is. It's relevant for somebody who's got an important job to be one of the people who do well in that, not only for the sake of their functionality, but for the influence that they have, the inspiration that they have toward others. As an example, if your doctor is smoking cigarettes and clearly, impaired for any other reasons, like that maybe they're just simply tired because they don't rest properly, or they're complaining about their relationships, or they're not available, they're not attentive, their blood test might be normal, but that to you is not going to be a well enough person. That's not going to be an inspirational source. So when advice comes out of the mouth of that individual, you're going to say, well, do you take your own advice? I mean, is this really important for me if you don't do it? That to me is a relevant question you want to have in your own mind as you see people who give you advice of any sort. Do they follow this advice themselves? And if not, you know right then and there that maybe there's something either not right about it or they're missing a piece. So that's the subject of wellness. Wellness is a holistic state of being, not necessarily something that a picture can show you. Just as an aside, there are many athletes. One of the most visible at a time when heart disease was such an important subject and exercise was so important was Jim Fixx. He was a long-distance runner. I think he was the head of the New York State Running Association and one of the keys to the New York City Marathon, one of the great organizers and founders. And at the age of 51 or 2, I think, he dropped dead of a heart attack. This was a man who ran, who was exercising all the time, who looked healthy. His doctors might have said, I don't really know, but might have said, gee, your blood pressure is great. You look good. You're active. You're doing everything you want. And he had an undetected condition. I'm not suggesting that this was something that was preventable entirely, but perhaps intervention might have been in asking him a lot of questions, asking him to understand what other stresses he may have experienced, what other mild symptoms he may have had, and trying to connect the dots among them to see if something was brewing that went beyond the detection of the technology, even though that has improved. It's just not bulletproof. It's just not foolproof, this technology. And so we can't hang our hat on it entirely. So we have to do something different. If you want to get a taste of slow medicine, just as an aside, and a literal taste, we have something we call the Slow Medicine Cafe, where we invite people to our farm in Bedford, New York, which is about 40 miles or so north of New York City, about 20 miles from New Rochelle, where the studios are here. And once a month, we have an event, which is an open house. It's really just a fundraiser. There's no set fee. We ask people to contribute to support our work to help people who can't afford some of our services. But we'll serve food from our farm, including usually an frittata with eggs and vegetables, some wholesome products, and in an environment, our homes Sunraven there. And the next cafe will be, we're calling it the Fall Harvest Festival, and it'll be October 22nd, which is a Saturday. And for more information on that, you can go to the website, slowmedicine.org. You could also get more information about my work, of course, and you can even, if you email me, I'll send you those 77 questions, the Wellness Self-Test. If you've listened to the show and found it interesting and you're sort of intrigued and want to take that inventory, actually just send me an email, michael@slowmedicinedoctor, doctor.com, and I'll send you personally a response and that attachment, and maybe we can start a little bit of a conversation, and one day we can talk more extensively so that I can show you then how you take the next step in responding to some of those things that you might identify through that vehicle that may be important and relevant to your own health. Anyway, I really enjoyed sharing this with you, as I always do here on Mondays at 5 o'clock. This is Slow Medicine Radio, and my hope for you in this coming week as we go from summer to fall is that you enjoy that transition and look forward to all the beauty that's in store. So until then, take care of yourself. That's the operative term for today, and I'll be here next week to support you further.